Here we go, tips for new users. Unmute your mics before starting. So, afternoon guys, John O'Rees here from BoostNest, and everybody would have received the email mail out yesterday. Look, since the introduction of the restrictions and the announcements of the government subsidies, we've had a lot of questions about can I apply, do I qualify, how do I do it? And not only that, but a number of questions that would normally affect business, like how do I talk to my landlord? What about my bank? So what I wanted to do was bring together basically all our really important clients and basically give them access to all the answers for the questions that we've had so far, and probably some of the questions that they're going to have in the future. So please bear with me. There is a little bit of a delay between me obviously communicating through and it obviously being delivered to your screen. So first and foremost, I guess I just want to welcome everybody. Thank you for taking your time out. Some of you may have plenty to do, others may not have as much to do due to the shutdown and the likes of that. But look, I guess the key thing is everybody in New Zealand and in reality the world is being affected by this. So look, it's everybody's learning about what to do day to day. That's including, you know, your team members learning how to deal with being at home and either being on their own or having family pressures, which, you know, for the kids it may feel like a Saturday, whereas in fact it's actually a normal kind of working day for the adults. So look, you know, this is really unprecedented, and everybody's really being forced to adapt to working and operating in a new environment and a slightly restricted an environment. So people will be feeling a lot of pressure personally. They'll be getting a lot of stress, trying to understand how to manage, you know, home life and work life and the balance and schedules and all those sorts of things. And so I guess as employers and being part of a supply chain, we kind of have to, you know, think about people around us and try and identify those that are high risk of kind of being a little bit destabilised with being in a little bit of confinement and not really having as much structure and as much routine as they may have, because, you know, most of our team, they've probably been turning up to an office environment for 15, 20 years, and to really kind of strip that out and force them to work from home is really a totally new concept for them. And so yeah, it's important that we look after everybody's well-being. And in my opinion, everybody's will be different. It's a time to kind of be a little bit honest with yourself and understand how you're feeling, and to share that, and to be a little less stoic, as in, you know, she'll be right, or you know, everything's fine, mate, don't worry about it. So yeah, I mean, I've probably chosen to look at this period of lockdown kind of similar to what happens in Wellington over Christmas and January, which is, look, there's not much going on, business is at a little bit of a low, etc., etc. Everybody expects to not necessarily get payments, you know, on the 5th of January because everybody's away, all those sorts of things. So look, I think you possibly need to create some mental structures around how to deal with it. But I guess the key difference is hey, look, there's a lot of connection between what we're kind of suffering at the moment being in connection to the GFC of 2008, which, look, that was a slowdown and it affected a number of industries. Whereas I guess the difference with what's happening with COVID-19 is every business is affected. And it's been in a very short period of time. So I guess that the positive is that everybody's affected. So even though if a company's still open like a supermarket, look, their business has changed because they now have to radically implement new processes to maintain the health of their staff. Whereas, you know, a business like ours, we now have to work from home. So look, there's challenges for every business right at the moment. So yeah, and I guess probably one of the positive factors, which isn't often thought about, is where we are now in terms of COVID-19, it's really easy to understand. There's a disease that's passed on and anybody can get it. Whereas, look, I've seen a number of movies and I still don't really understand what happened in the GFC. There were some guys that were shorting this and doing that and packaging and selling finance bits and pieces, So I think the positive is everybody understands it, and so if it's easier to understand, it's probably easier to communicate and really be able to transfer the knowledge of what the risks are. So I guess, like always, we don't really know how long this is going to go for. So you do really need to remember that your team is generally the most important part of your business. Most businesses will have spent years putting together the team that they have now. Sometimes there will be limited availability of labour. But look, I know I've been building my team for 6-7 years now, and look, it's taken a long time. So we just have to be conscious about, just because we've got this little bit of a fairly fast shutdown, you still got to think about your team, because there is going to be an end to this. We just don't know. We just don't have any certainty about when that will be. A lot of the government agencies are still working, Companies Office, WINS, PPSR, all of those sorts of things. My wife works for a government department, and for them it's very much business as usual, just remotely. So the government agencies will be responding. It'll just be slightly slower than usual for what we're expecting, what we're used to in a normal environment. So yeah. In terms of I guess a couple little bit of housekeeping matters. So what we're going to do is I've got a bit of an agenda that I'm going to run through today to I guess to cover off a bunch of topics. There is a meeting chat window that I have put together, and at the top of it there are some employee support pages and some links to some other websites that will be useful. So a couple of common questions, and also a list of the essential businesses as of today. So that will be a website that will be constantly updated, adding, subtracting businesses to who's on the essential services list. I've also, in there's a fact sheet or a data sheet regarding the wage subsidy, which is the official COVID-19 subsidy fact sheet, so you can download and have a look. And then I've got a little Excel spreadsheet, don't worry. I know everybody thinks accountants spreadsheets complicated, but a little subsidy spreadsheet there, which I'll run through a little bit later, just to give people an understanding about how the subsidy actually kind of works when it comes to wages and the practicality of it. And what it means for an employee, and we're going to touch on a bunch of that stuff. So obviously the primary source of truth as to what's going on with COVID, and that's in terms of the health situation, restrictions, all those sorts of things, is covid19.govt.nz. And so that should be your first port of call in terms of if you've got a question or you want some information, or what is the current status of the situation in terms of New Zealand, what level are we at, it's that website. That is the key source of truth. Moving on to, I guess, what we refer to as the subsidy. Basically, what we're referring to, the subsidy is about 2 weeks ago, the government announced a wage subsidy support for business at a certain level based on the number of employees for a number of weeks. And they gave some criteria around how businesses can apply for it, but also which businesses qualify for it. And when they first released it, I don't think they expected to get to level 4 as quickly as they have done. And so as a result, when they announced it, they talked about, if you have had 30% or you are going to, it's expected that you will see a 30% decline in your business revenue, then you can apply for the subsidy. Obviously, moving quite quickly, a number of businesses have applied and received, lump sum payments and deposits, which is fantastic. But I guess people need to be aware of is about the subsidy and what it's actually supposed to be used for. But basically, what the government said is we want people to stay employed. So even if you've had a downturn in your business due to COVID, we want you to keep people employed. And the main reason for that is if all the businesses close, then what it does is it puts huge pressure on the likes of work and income to process those payments and those people that have suddenly become unemployed to some form of benefit, financial relief. And they don't want that. They don't want 300 people turning up outside 300,000 people turning up outside work and income offices, because they just won't be able to handle it, and it'll lead to more problems. But likewise, also, if this is only a short period of time, let's say that after 4 weeks everything clears up and it can go back to business as usual, albeit with a few possible little restrictions. Businesses have got to have labour and access to people who know what they're doing in order to get the economy going again. So it is very much about a short-term look. We want you to keep as many people employed, because even if they're not as productive, and you, the employer, and the government shares the burden of allowing those people to stay in employment, then when it comes out and the economy starts picking back up, it'll pick up with more gusto, it'll have more momentum. And I think that that's really why it's been quite targeted, quite specific about not supporting business with expenses, but supporting business at maintaining the labour, because it is such a slow turnaround to get people back into business and employed. So how does it work? Basically, the government has said, look, go to this website, fill out this form, list your employees' names, ID numbers, date of births, and if they work 20 hours or more or 20 hours or less. Put in your bank account details and hit submit. And then basically they will send you a lump sum payment of $7,000 per employee who's working over 20 hours, and about $4,200 for every employee working under 20 hours. And the idea is that amount of money should subsidise them for a period of 12 weeks. Now, obviously, different businesses have different labour costs, and for likes of guys that are employing, highly skilled IT professionals at 100,000, it's not really going to help them too much. But for kind of the middle income, small businesses where somebody's on anywhere between sort of 40 to 60,000, it will cover just about half of the wage costs for them. And the condition is that the employers will continue to pay the employees on the payroll 80%, or their best efforts to get to 80%. And that little bit of detail has actually been overlooked. So look, if you can't get to the 80%, but you're doing as best you can to manage crucial expenses, equipment finance payments, all those sorts of things, but you can only cover the wages cost of 60%, then we think that that's probably still going to be okay in terms of the requirements for meeting the subsidy. So yeah, that's probably the key thing that has been overlooked by a number of people. Just got a notice there, black screen. Has anybody... Can anybody type in the meeting chat just letting us know if they're able to access or not? No. Okay. Maybe I'll try this. This might work a bit better. Hopefully this works. So just coming back to the subsidy. So if you qualify and you feel that you're going to meet all those requirements, look, no problems whatsoever. It's going to mean that the subsidy comes in, and then you can apply that to support your wage payments that are going out. Sorry, I just had a message saying that it's coming up with a black screen for some users, so just wait till I get a reply. But so I guess the key thing around the subsidy is making sure that it is there to support wages. No going and buying a spa pool, no new car, because these amounts, if you've got 15, 20 employees, you could be getting somewhere to a deposit of around $100,000. So depending on the hours that they work. So it's quite important that you do apply it to wages. There's been a couple of, I was just on an accountant call presentation just before, and there was a number of technical issues that could possibly turn up. So say, for example, say if your bank account number that you've provided to MSD, when processing the application, is actually an overdraft. The money comes in, clears the overdraft, and the bank won't give you access to that money. Well, technically, you've got a massive issue there. So what we have been suggesting to a number of our clients is, when you apply for the subsidy, create a separate bank account and get that subsidy deposited into the separate bank account. And then that way it's clear from all your other expenses. It can't get chewed up with automatic payments and all those sorts of things, and therefore it can be specifically matched against wages transferred across into the business account in order to allow those wages to go out. It's the subsidy, if you're going to apply and you're a shareholder, director working in your business, like so many of my clients are, then you include yourselves in there as well. So just because you may not necessarily be on the POE schedules as a shareholder, but are working, 40, 50 hours a week, you can still get a deposit for your $585 into your bank account as a working shareholder. Now, there have been a couple of scenarios where MSD hasn't processed it as such, and we're not entirely sure why. But we're hoping to find out a little bit more in the next couple of days as to why those payments may not have been come through, or those individuals have been ignored. We've also noticed a number of the payroll providers, such as iPayroll, Xero Payroll, they're already starting to account for the subsidy as part of their wage calculations. There's a couple of little tick boxes, some drop boxes and the likes of that, which allow you to understand and get an idea about how much you're actually topping up for each employee. So really good to see that the payrolls have been able to update their software in such a quick, we've seen in such a quick turnaround and being able to update their software to be able to handle these sorts of things. The payments have been coming out really, really quickly. In the first week, we processed a couple, and they were actually submitted in the morning, and the amounts were paid out to employers in the afternoons and early evenings. So really fast payment. There's also been a real stipulation in government departments, which is basically businesses are going to need this. We can't sit on the money. So we've noticed that the turnaround is about 1 to 2 days in terms of the payment coming out from MSD to businesses, but they say 5 days, but in our experience, it's been a lot less than that. The other thing is I kind of mentioned it before. Say if the money gets deposited into your bank account's overdrawn, the money comes in. That combined with a couple of other issues could potentially lead to a little bit of fraud that MSD might be worried about. So because the money specifically has to be used for wages, if you use it for something else or it gets eaten up by some other expense or outgoing out of your business, then it's actually not being used for what it's intended for. And so there's the possibility that once the dust settles, MSD will be able to track the use of the money, because they'll be able to talk to ID and get the payrolls schedules from there to make sure that the money is actually being applied where it needs to be done. So there is a question about how fraud will be accounted for in that particular scenario. But probably the biggest one that I would be more worried about for our clients is how many of your employees would have access to HR records, things like other employees' date of births, ID numbers, etc. Because there is a potential there for staff members or people who know intimate details of your business to go and make an application on your behalf, but put their bank account details in and receive your wage subsidy. Not really sure if that's occurred yet or how it would be detected at all, but it's just something that you really need to be concerned about, because no doubt MSD is keeping track of who they're paying money and how much, and who the employees are on those schedules. So if one of your employee gets in first before you've made your application and it turns up, then it could be very difficult to resolve that, and certainly potentially quite a timely delay in getting support. But as I said, the best way of doing it is, if you are going to get somebody to do it for you, is make sure it goes into a separate bank account. You keep a track of all the details that are provided to you by MSD once you've filled in the form, and then making sure that that money actually hits your bank account. It's something what we do. If we're doing it on behalf of a client, we always check a couple of days later hey, make sure you let us know if the money's hit your bank account, just to make sure that there's no issues. A couple of other funny little things that we thought was a bit odd. You can actually do dual applications. So say if you work for a company and the company makes the application through the subsidy scheme themselves, but you also do a little bit of part-time work, you can also apply. So from a logic point of view, there is the potential for a little bit of double dipping because it's based on an employee that's employed at that point in time. And also if employees are going to shift between two different employers, they say, for example, Mitre 10 applies for Steve, Steve then moves to Bunnings, and then Bunnings applies for Steve. Both employers will get the full subsidy even though there's one employee. So a little bit odd there, but apparently it is okay. The other question that we've, in relation to it, we've been asked is where, something like that happens, or if the employee quits and doesn't necessarily move on to another employer, what happens if they quit 5 weeks after receiving the 12-week subsidy? Well, or any other adjustment that you might think would be sort of normal and logical, is there is no process for making any adjustments or refunding money if you've got some subsidy money that you're not entitled to and you want to give it back to MSD. Currently, there's no process for giving it back. So I'm not really quite sure how that's going to develop going forward, but yeah, certainly a couple of little details in the system that probably need to be resolved in the near future. Another couple of questions that we've been asked is when we get the money, how do we treat it when it comes to our accounting system? Well, the good news is you don't have to pay any tax on it if you are the employer receiving the payment, nor do you have to include it in your GST return. So a lot of people will have received it in March. Their next GST return will be due for the period ending March. So we need to make sure that when you're going through reviewing your GST transactions that you haven't included the MSD payment in your GST calculations, because there is no GST on it, none whatsoever. Likewise, when the money goes out of your bank account, there is no GST on there either. So you're not paying GST on it when the money comes into your account, and you're not claiming GST on it when the money goes out. But in the end, who pays tax on it? Well, the employees do. And basically, I'll see if I can share this Excel spreadsheet that I have. There, open desktop, download, open a browser, get link. But yeah, share. Here's my spreadsheet. Yeah, so what we've got here is we've just got a little pretty simple spreadsheet. Basically, if you've got an employee with gross wages of $1,000, which would be, say, hey, look, if say if they're on $52,000, that's what they'd be getting each week. So with no subsidy, I've just rounded the figures a little bit. So the gross wages would be $1,000, normal tax deductions of $200. The KiwiSaver employer contributions at 3%. 3% on 1,000 is $30. The net pay to the employee would be $800. Without the subsidy, the actual total cost to you as an employer would be $1,030. Now, under the subsidy, it works pretty similar all the way down to the net pay to the employee. So this doesn't change. The only thing that's different is the 585 comes in and reimburses you basically for $585. And so the cost of someone who you would normally pay $1,000 to a week, being $800 plus tax, actually reduces down to $445. So that's really, in a basic essence, how the scheme's supposed to work. So I hope, like I said, it's not a a particularly detailed spreadsheet, but it's basically just to give you a roundabout way as to how the thing's actually supposed to work. The other things that you should start to be doing in terms of the subsidy is talking to your banks and finances and see who else can assist you with managing your cash flow. The reality is most businesses need to be directed in a way where the business is kind of going into hibernation more than anything else. So we're just looking at key expenses, making sure the money comes in as much as it can, and maintaining a fairly steady cash flow into the business, and also managing the cash flow leaving the business. So look at any unnecessary expenses. You might have your business Netflix or your Sky subscriptions or something like that, where you may go, actually, hold on, if nobody's going to be in the office, we don't need that, so therefore we should terminate that. But basically, have a conversation with your banks and see if there's anything that they can provide in terms of maybe a reduction of fees or anything along those lines. Moving on, the government's also announced that they are working with banks to help people manage their mortgage payments. And so what they have kind of used the words around as mortgage holidays or payment holidays, which have been around for a while, and often at the discretion of banks. Normally when, at their discretion, they can use it as something for people who might be a little bit of a short-term cash flow issue, but the bank has assessed them and said, well, hold on, it's only 2 or 3 months where you've got this problem, and then based on what you've told us plus what we know of the industry, in 3 months' time you have some more money, so you'll be able to start paying from them. So similar sort of approach. So what the initial sort of indication is from the government and the banks is that it will be a 6-month interest and principal payment holiday where the payments are suspended. So you don't pay the bank. So if you're normally paying them $4,000 a month, and a portion of that is your interest, and a portion of that is actually repaying part of the original loan you took down, those payments would be put on pause for 6 months. Sounds pretty good, eh? The issue with it is the banks will continue to accrue the interest on it. So while you're not paying the interest, if you've still got a $100,000 loan, it's not like they're not giving you, they're not charging you interest over the 6 months. They will be. And so there's only a few scenarios where we're recommending that people should be looking into this. And most of it is around those who have got fairly substantial borrowings or their ratios are a bit up. So I'm just going to run through them now. So first, who should be considering it is where you've got a commercial building where the debt levels, as in the value of the building is here, and the debt levels are about 70% of the value of that business, of that building, and that you're likely to lose your rent. So say, for example, if your tenant goes out of business in the middle of a lockdown and they are done for, they're not coming back, their business has evaporated, then this is something for you to consider, because it's unlikely that you would have built up a sufficient cash flow to be able to sustain the bank payments. So a mortgage holiday is perfect for commercial building owners with high debt levels who have lost their tenants. That's scenario number one. Property investors. Well, we're still not really quite sure how it's actually going to apply to them or how it's going to apply to Joe Blogg's mum and dad. But property investors who are in a similar situation to the commercial property owners, where they've got a lot of debt to value in terms of the debt, they often refer to it to the loan to value ratio. So where your loan is high compared to the value of the building or the property, that's also a scenario where you would consider this. If you're also going to lose your rent, or for whatever reason you think that your rent payments are likely to be in doubt. Now, the residential renting situation at the moment is quite difficult. There's often a lot of movement between residential properties in sort of March. And so with the lockdown, it's obviously prevented any of that occurring, and also changing tenants and all those sorts of things. So look, some property investors will be fine because they'll be on a fixed term contract and everything will just continue on as usual, providing, of course, they continue to get paid the rent. But others could be in some real tricky scenarios where the tenancy's ended, the tenants are still there because they can't move, you've then got your new tenant who's in a bit of a predicament and could jeopardise the whole situation. So, look, it's going to take some careful management. But yeah, likewise, if you need any help, I'm sure there's some property investors that property managers that will be more than happy to give you a hand. And if you need some suggestions of who might be good for you, please let us know and we can put you in touch. Coming back to the mortgage holidays, the other one is business owners with high levels of debt and they've got substantial asset finance on, say, manufacturing equipment, heavy equipment such as diggers, trucks, all those sorts of things that can't be used at the moment because of the lockdown. So those business owners would also look at maybe doing a mortgage payment holiday in order to simply match their cash flow coming in, which won't be coming in because they'll be on lockdown, with major expenses or major cash going out. So those are probably the three scenarios that we would see as being the most likely and easiest to identify. But of course, look, everybody's different. Everybody's got their own personal circumstances. If you've got any questions, please give us a ring or send me an email and I'll get in touch with you. We've been really good at getting back to people. But of course, we still don't know what the qualifications will be. We still haven't got any details. It's really just an indicator that, look, there will be some mortgage release. Commercial leases. Well, if you are a tenant in a commercial building and you're not on the essential businesses list, yeah, quite tricky. Basically, I'm not a lawyer, but we have a lot of commercial property owners as clients, and they've come across this. The key thing is in New Zealand, we often forget about our commercial lease. We often struggle to find it. The thing, once it's signed, gets chucked away in the back box. Nobody ever refers to it. It's not a generally regular referred to document, probably until now. The first thing you do is, if you are in a commercial space and you can't occupy that because of the lockdown, you need to get your lease. And if you haven't got it already, you need to go and get it pretty much straight after you've finished this live stream. So in terms of the commercial leasing, if you have a standard Auckland District Law Society 6th edition lease agreement, which will be for leases that have commenced on and around 2012 onwards, you need to check out paragraph 27.5 subsection C. So 27.5 subsection C. But basically, in a nutshell, what the legal jargon there says that if you can't occupy your building, you don't have to pay the rent, or you have to come to a fair and reasonable apportionment between the costs between you and the landlord. So I'll actually grab that paragraph up because for some people it will actually be quite important. So the title of the paragraph is No Access in Emergency. So this is Auckland District Law Society, paragraph 27.5. If there is an emergency and the tenant is unable to gain access to the premises to fully conduct the tenant's business from the premises because of reasons of safety of the public or property, or the need to prevent, reduce, or overcome any hazard, harm, or loss that may be associated with the emergency, including prohibited or restricted access, cordon applying to the premises. So that's if somebody was shot and killed and the police have to come around and do like a cordon. Prohibition on the use of the premises pending the completion of a structural engineer or other reports and appropriate certifications required by a competent authority. So if there's an earthquake and people look at the building and it's not quite square and they go, we need a structural engineer to do a report. But the key one here is C, restriction on occupation of the premises by a competent authority. So what they're saying is look, if the government says nobody's allowed to operate business, then this section applies if it's in your lease. Now, it will be, unless you've crossed it out or the landlord's crossed it out, it will be in most of the Auckland District Law Society lease agreements from 2012. If you have a lease that predates that, you may not have this in there, or you may have a similar clause which isn't quite as specific as this one. But either way, you need to comb through your lease and understand what the requirements are and what it means for your business. But basically, it's saying, hey, look, if you can't get in there and it's due to, act of God or, Corona-19 outbreak or COVID-19 outbreak, then you don't have to pay your rent. And also, if you've got operating expenses as well, that they're apportioned. So that's actually quite key. We've had a number of clients talk to us about that as to what it means. So the key thing is look, go and check your lease. If you've got it in there, then it's a pretty good standing for a negotiation in relation with your current commercial landlord. Likewise, if you're a landlord, most likely if you've signed a lease agreement under this agreement, your tenants are probably going to start enacting that. So you need to have a bit of a plan as to how you're going to deal with it. So you might go for, operating costs, which might be the standard, power to the security alarms, those sorts of things. You might go 50-50, but the rent would generally not be payable. So that's quite a key thing. So yeah, if you've got any questions, get in touch with your lawyer who helped you through the lease agreement. If you want us to have a quick look at it and not provide you legal advice, but give you a couple of pointers, send me an email as well. Please attach a copy of your lease, because sometimes, as we've found in leases, there might be a paragraph like this, and then there'll be a paragraph further down saying that this paragraph doesn't apply because of X, Y, Z. So you need the whole lease. Some other tax changes that came in was there were some changes to the low asset write-off. This was that $500 amount. Often I will have asked you a question, have you spent any money on assets over $500? Yes. Anything under $500? No. Basically, this is being lifted to $5,000 from 1st of April for 12 months, and then down to $1,000 from then on. Depreciation on commercial buildings kicks in at 2% from the 1st of April, and that will be the book value. So for those who have had buildings for 15, 20 years, they would have known that back in 2011 depreciation stopped, and then now that's being reintroduced. So whatever the book value was at 1st of April 2011, that will be our starting point for depreciation from 1st of April, plus any other non-deductible capital expenditure you've made on the building. There's also been an increase in the provisional tax threshold, but nobody cares about that apart from accountants. Working for families and tax credits. This is going to be massive. So once the new tax year comes through, 1st of April, we see a massive opportunity here for clients who have got families and who have been affected. So they would have received most likely they will receive the subsidy, the wage subsidy, but also there's a high probability that you'll also qualify for the working for families tax credits. So this is basically number of kids, their ages, times a formula equals a check. It's actually quite a good time to apply for working for family, well, even to not apply for working for families tax credits at the moment. IID over the last 3 years have been making some changes to their IT system, and as of, I think it was about December, they basically took all the security features off the internal system for working for families. So they released 70,000 assessments for working for families, which they didn't have complete information about, and had never, and often in most cases, they never asked. So a number of our clients had, not because they've never qualified for working for families ever, started receiving refunds because Inland Revenue's information was incomplete and none of their internal safety features were enacted, and so money was just going out left, right and centre. We think it's probably, I don't know, an estimate would probably be 120 million that's gone out the door incorrectly. We've had a huge bun fight with them because we think that they're incompetent in regards to their working for families administration over the last 3 months, and it's been a huge problem for us. But what is a problem for us is possibly an opportunity for you from April. So what we will be doing is prioritising a number of clients who we know have got families where they've had some tough times in the last 3 months on lockdown, all that kind of stuff. We'll be prioritising them because the chances are there could be a huge benefit for working for families refunds. So if you've got any questions about working for families, please let us know, get in touch, send me an email, and we can give you some answers on that. A couple of the other things that we come across is sale and purchase as a business and other significant assets over the lockdown. Well, most legal agreements will have what they call a force majeure paragraph in it. I probably said that wrong because I'm not a lawyer, but basically a paragraph within an agreement which allows some sort of interpretation as what to do when there's like a physical stalemate or a lockdown where the contract can't actually be executed in the manner that it was expected to. So look, if you're looking to settle in the next 3 weeks, it's, you know, a bit touch and go. There will be a portion of your, or a couple of paragraphs within your contract as to what to do. Luckily enough, none of our clients that I'm aware of are halfway through a sale and purchase of a business. All of those were conducted well before the lockdown. So don't have any experience or practical advice on that at the moment, but always look at your contract and see what it says. In terms of tax payments, people wondering, hey, look, you know, we're in lockdown now, do I have to pay my tax? Well, the only thing that is certain in life is death and taxes. And at the moment, probably that we're going to be in lockdown for another 3 or 4 weeks. So the answer is yes, you do need to pay your tax. If there's a tax payment that was due on or after the 20th of February, IRD will be providing some relief in terms of if people don't make their payments on the due dates for payments that were due after the 20th of February, then they will be able to reduce or remove penalties and interest on those late payments. So if you can't make your tax payments, best thing to do, send IRD an email through their secure portal or get us to contact them for you, and we can come up with some sort of arrangement. Yeah, I guess where to from here? I mean, yeah, pretty tough. I mean, we've covered a bunch of things in relation to the subsidy and how that kind of works. I've got a bunch of questions here that I'll go through that we've been sent through in order to be answered, and they're a little bit quirky. So while we haven't included them as part of the main body, but what's going to happen after 4 weeks? Well, who knows? I suspect we'll probably have more. I think the lockdown will probably be expanded or extended. But as a result, I think we might also see an expansion of what's on the essential services list. Look, I mean, there's heaps of opinions flying around at the moment. Nobody knows what's going on. I mean, Westpac chucked out like a headline. Maybe they're trying to get their share price up, saying 200,000 jobs are going to be lost as part of this. You know, and a third of the economic activity will disappear as part of the lockdown. Look, nobody knows. The only thing that we can suggest is take some time now and work on your business, because you've got the opportunity, you've probably got the ability to get a little bit of time, a little bit of clarity of thought where you don't have clients and customers ringing you up and going, hey, look, you know, I need that shipped to me today. It allows you to take a step out of your business and kind of focus on things that could work. Because the reality is we don't know what this new economy is going to look like once we get out of lockdown. All we can say is, hey, look, spend the time now preparing for the exit. You know, the recovery time, you know, could be a mix. It could be really short and sweet in terms of, you know, we're back onto it. I had a conversation yesterday where somebody suggested that China's back up to 60 or 70% in terms of productivity. And, you know, logging might, you know, the import of logs is now starting to pick up again. So, I mean, to me, that seems pretty quick. But then again, hey, look, you know, it could be a slow return, a very mellow bounce back. You know, we have been relying on tourism a lot, and this has been something that's really impacted tourism. I've been apart from the headlines where the tourists don't care about COVID and they're jumping in helicopters and all that kind of stuff. But the key thing is understanding about, you know, where you are in the supply chain at the moment, who your key customers and suppliers are, keeping on good relationships with them, because you're going to need them to pull out of this little blip quickly. And so regardless of whatever the situation is, the lockdown, etc., you're going to need to be ready for when this thing's over and starts to peter out. So, you know, and you always got to remember, most businesses are on the same boat that you are, albeit slightly different. And even those that are open still have a huge burden of healthcare for their team, which I can just about guarantee none of them would have had a social distancing policy prior to the start of March. Nobody would have. And so, a huge amount of these businesses won't be equipped to deal with it. So, everybody's reconfiguring their businesses, making things work as best they can in the current environment. So, you've still got to work with your debtors, look at regular payments from them, and if there's incentives that you can give those customers to make sure that they keep making payments to you, you've got to be doing that and prioritising your key payments out of the business. Who are the key guys that are going to keep us up and running, and who are we going to need when we start to pull out of this. So that's, I guess those are my thoughts. There is a message panel on the right-hand side. If you have any questions now that I haven't covered up, you can add those on the side. Meeting chat. Is that meeting chat on? Oh, there we go. I must have clicked on the wrong thing. All right, so what first of all, so this is from Richard. Okay, what about self-employed where two directors don't pay a wage, but they do take drawings? Well, really good question. It was actually one that I found out the answer to earlier today, which basically, if there is somebody who is depending on the business paying them a wage, and that's a very broad kind of sense of, a wage, then they are entitled to the subsidy. So if they're not on PAYE, but they get a shareholder salary at the end of the year, or they get some sort of distribution, which is recorded in the company as a wage or a salary payment out, they're entitled to the subsidy as long as they're there for the 12 weeks. Seems like everybody took my advice and logged in anonymously. So, yep, all good. What if you are here's a good question. What if you're a new business and you can't prove loss of income compared to the same period last year? Well, they did talk about a perceived decline of 30%. So, look, it's pretty loose, but they have said that new businesses that are starting up do qualify for the subsidy, providing providing you had a good intention and your best efforts were to make a profit. I mean, look, the last thing you want to do is set up a company, today and then apply for the subsidy, and set up a company and apply for the subsidy. There will be some cross-matching. So, look, I think as long as there's one person, one subsidy as self-employed, you'll be fine. I guess, good question, Andrew. What happens if, I'm guessing it's a question, what happens if you can't get the bank to transfer the money out of an OD account, or if the bank automatically transfers it across? I don't have an answer for that. It's pretty, I would say with the banks all working from home and being at a reduced capacity, I'd say it's going to be pretty hard for them to give you an answer as well. But look, the key thing would be, is if that's a concern of yours, then maybe go, if you've got an empty bank account at another bank, is put the money in that one. Lawyers always love you being at more than one bank, especially if you've got mortgages. Yep, I will email the spreadsheet out if nobody can get it. But yeah, the wage subsidy is very much to help short-term cash flow difficulties related to wages, not any other business expenses. I understand that businesses have lease payments to pay, may not be required to pay the lease due to being able to access the premises. Do you feel that a business should stop the payment for 1 month, lock down to reserve this for the future? Oh, look, coming back to it, it depends on what your lease is. If you've got a fairly modern lease, post 2012, and it's an Auckland District Law Society lease, you can, depending on how long the suspension of services are, you'll be able to go rent-free for that period. If you don't have it, then and there is no such allowance in your lease for an emergency shutdown and not required to pay, you'll need to keep paying. And in most scenarios, you'll probably, whether you remember or don't remember, most leases, commercial leases, are personally guaranteed. So for those old leases, it's a real issue, especially if it's just often, sometimes we've seen them where, it's, 200 square metres somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and, they've just done a 2-page lease. You'll pay me every month, but often those do have a cancellation, 1 month notice. So that may be an option. But yeah, like anything, it's always going to be working with landlords. Like landlords, commercial landlords are going to be stuck in the same boat. If you don't pay them, they're still going to pay the bank. So, your success on not paying rent may actually hinge on them being able to qualify for a mortgage holiday. So yeah, it's just about good communication. What if the other director, what about the other director wife? I guess if that person is receiving a wage or has received a wage through the business, so often it's pretty normal for one of the, either the husband or the wife to be working full-time in the business, and then the wife or the husband providing a support role. Well, if you can say that support role is more than 20 hours a week, then you'll get the 585 times 12, the $7,000. If they're 20 hours or less, then they'll only qualify for the 4. If in doubt, claim. Yeah, I guess so. And look, as I've said to a bunch of clients, think about if you were on the opposite side and you'd just given somebody $7,000 or 50 or 60 grand, and you'd ask them, like, what have you done with it? And they said, hey, look, we have spent it on maintaining our wages, looking after our team, maybe buying equipment so they can work from home, that sort of stuff. It's going to be pretty hard to go, actually, you need to pay us that 60 grand back, when they probably don't have the 60 grand. Yeah, so it's really about coming up with a good reason as to why you've done what you've done. It's going to be pretty hard to argue with, but likewise, the government has said you qualify for this if you pay 80%, or your best efforts to pay 80% of the wages. So what if your employer is overseas and you came home? Ooh, does it go up to the top, does it? Down the bottom. Where does that go? Oh gosh. I won't click publish again, will I? Now I've lost my place. Sorry, guys. Yep, I'm the director at that claim. Here we go. So how do you calculate payments to an employee who inconsistently earns or doesn't have irregular hours? So what I would probably do is look at the last month, say the month of March, and say how many hours did they work for that month, and then divide that by the number of weeks. If that's more than 20, claim the full amount. If it's less than 20, claim the lesser amount. If you have a contractor on your payroll whom we deduct withholding tax, does he or she apply for their own subsidy, or should we include him like an employee? There wasn't a lot of guidance when the subsidy first came out, so a lot of our advice was, if you've got a full-time contractor that pretty much solely works for you, put them on your schedule and continue to pay them as much as you can. That has now changed. So the government has now said, look, if you're a contractor, you must apply under the self-employed subsidy. So that answers that one. Hey, Jono, can I hire staff and get the payment for them? Yes, you can. So if you hire anybody over this period, from what I understand, you just reapply or submit the application in again, leaving off the existing employees that you've already claimed for, and put the new employee on, and you should get the subsidy. So really good question, really good question. would you be able to apply as self-employed or under the business form? Would you have the money to transfer from the business to account your personal with personal? So the subsidies, irrespective of what type of entity it is, it's really, are you an employer or are you self-employed? So you could be the sole owner operator of a business, but are in a company structure. You would still apply under the self-employed process. If you own a business and it's a company or set up as a company and you employ 20 staff, then you apply under the employer scheme and you put yourselves on that one. So rather than having one for the shareholder employees and the self-employed and then one for the wage people, they've just streamlined it to say if you own and operate the company and you're on there as a shareholder employee, you put your name in with the rest of them. And if you're operating as a sole trader, a partnership, or the sole person in a company, then you would put that through you just put that through the self-employed process. If you brought on another director, well, I guess they'd be an employee, so they would still qualify. I don't know. Coming back to that point where I said, look, it's based on employees, not necessarily companies. So I mean, I guess the tricky thing is you could say, look, you could appoint Jono to 20 different companies and then claim 20 subsidies on Jono, being the same person. That's probably something we'd probably need to be a little bit conscious of. But look, if it was a transition or an introduction into a business where the person hadn't been there before, then I think definitely, yeah, the subsidy would qualify. But yeah, I think the legislation was only enacted today or yesterday or something like that. So it's pretty fast turnaround. There hasn't been a lot of analysis. And look, the idea when government went out to business and said, hey, look, we want to do a subsidy, we want to help you guys. What are some of the key elements of the process? And the result was make it simple. And when you make something simple, you lose things like detail about shareholders, transferring employees, all that kind of stuff goes out the window. So yeah, that's kind of the key of it. I'll just jump onto some of the questions that we had prior to coming in. Service with a smile. Where's that other document I had? Here we go. Right. If the company is unable to top up the rest of the weekly wages from the $5.85 provided, what are my options? Can I use more money from the wage subsidy to make that 80%? Obviously, it won't cover the full 12 weeks if I do that. Would I possibly have to start using annual leave that they're entitled to? What if they've only got a couple, only a couple of them have got annual leave? Well, look, a real mix of, I guess, a real mix of issues there. My suggestion is look, coming back to the best efforts, look, everybody's got a different definition of what that is, but my thought wowould be look, give them the $5.85, which is of course before tax, and then top it up as much as you can each week depending on cash flow. It's the process isn't designed to just give them $5.85. You've got to do your best. So, I mean, look, if you had a couple of weeks at 80 and then it dropped down to 60 or $5.85, whatever whichever is higher, I think that would probably be good enough. I think in most situations it's going to be pretty hard to say that that's unfair. Or outside of the design of the scheme. Look, I mean, if you couldn't pay the 80% because you bought a new jet ski, I think you're going to have some problems. There is some specific stuff around annual leave. If you can pay that out, but of course, annual leave is just a number on a payroll schedule. The key thing is actually going to be your cash flow. So if you can't afford to pay them the 80% out of cash flow, it's unlikely that giving them the annual leave is really going to make that much of a difference. So look, just do your best, mate. It's probably the most down-to-earth advice I can give you. What happens if I close down the business within 3 months? What happens to the money? and what happens to the employees. What exposure would I have as an employer, and what happens if the business goes into liquidation? Well, what happens if you close down in 3 months? I guess it depends on how you close down. If you close down via your own choice and just make everybody redundant, the theory is you have to pay whatever the unexpired portion of that subsidy is, which of course, as I mentioned earlier, there is currently no process for, so I don't know how you would do that. So I don't know what happens with the money, in short. Surely the logical side of things would say, hey, look, some of it needs to be paid back. What happens to the employees if I close down? Well, despite us being in a scenario where there is, quite a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of restrictions, as an employer, you still have a huge amount of responsibilities as an employer to continue to treat the employees as if you were trading normally. So, take the COVID-19 situation out of the equation. How would you treat your employees if it was just, the 15th of August 2018? Would you still be going through the process? How would you treat them? What are the things that you would concern you? Would you be worried that you would be, sued for breach of trust, breach of Employment Act, all those sorts of things? Those issues still are about at the moment. So you do need to be quite conscious about how you deal with your employees. Probably the easiest section of all those questions, which was what happens if my business goes into liquidation? Well, providing you don't have an overdrawn current shareholder's current account, pretty much all your problems will be solved, or they'll be solved by somebody else that isn't you. So all those issues that I've talked about would evaporate on liquidation. Do I need to have my financial statements finalised to get the subsidy? The answer is no. It is just a form. So as long as you have got your business name, business ID number, your employees' full names, ID numbers, date of birth, know whether they work 20 hours or more, 20 hours or less, and have a bank account, you can apply for the subsidy. Pretty simple. But just coming back to the tax returns and financial statements, you still have to file all your returns on time. There hasn't been any commentary around changing the dates when GST returns, PAYE returns, all those sorts of things need to be filed. It's only in relation to the penalties, the interest of not being able to make payments. So there may be a little bit of leeway that creeps into some of those filings going forward, but at this stage there's nothing. So you still need to file your tax returns and pay your accountant as well. But you only have to pay your accountant once, just once. Unless you really like us, then you can pay us twice. What other subsidies and care packages are there? Well, there's not much. We've already talked about, at the end of the 2020 tax year, which is just about to finish, thinking about working for families tax credits. There have been some changes there, meaning that some of the criteria and hurdles have disappeared. So that's probably going to be the biggest winner for most of the clients who have had some difficulties, they've had a downturn, and they got kids. It's going to mean a lump sum payout, very much like the subsidy, with no strings. For employees that have been made redundant or the business has ceased, there is the employment benefit. Depending on a few circumstances, they may qualify. I'm not an expert, don't know how much it is, but the WINS website will be able to tell you that. But also something a good friend of mine, Mark, out at Red Hot, has been quite good at finding some information out on is MSD has a number of support packages for businesses in certain industries. They're trying to promote business and development in those industries because, I don't know, maybe they're not as prominent and would potentially be good for the Wellington region, New Zealand economy. So there may be some supplemental benefits that MSD is able to provide you based on that, but nothing specifically for the next couple of months. At this stage, there's no indication that there will be any further payouts or subsidies. But probably the next biggest announcement will be the 14th of May, which is normally the annual budget. So normally those budget measures either come into effect then, very rarely are they backdated, or from 1st of June. So there could be a bit more care package, support, all those sorts of things that that come into play as part of the budget. But I think probably what's going to happen, we're pretty much still just working through the mechanics of the current wage subsidies, the lockdowns, getting everybody understanding what's going on there. They'll probably want to make sure that they've got that stuff sorted, as well as containing the virus. So that's probably the key thing at the moment, where they're kind of going, well, look, we've bought ourselves till June based on this wage subsidy thing. And then from there we might reassess. But look, there probably will be some more stimulus, there probably will be some more spending. Yeah, who knows? Last question. Well, it's actually a large section of questions. Thank you, Paula. If the lockdown only lasts for 4 weeks, will the government expect us to send the balance of the funds back, or can we use it to continue to subsidise your staff's wages? You can continue to use it to subsidise your staff's wages. Talked about the tax. Yep. So basically, if you were to only pay the $585 to your employee, then they would pay tax on that. So you would still take student loan off, PRWE, etc., KiwiSaver off that if you were going to just pay them the $585. So that's how the tax on that works in a nutshell. The other thing is, last question here, what should I code the MSD COVID-19 payment to in Xero? Well, there's a couple of ways depending on how you do it. So you can, once the payment comes in, obviously it's money coming into the bank account, you can code it to directly to wages, or if part of that payment is actually for you as a shareholder, you can split the transaction up. So say if you're the only shareholder employee and you've got $40,000 as a payment, you can split that to say 33,000 goes to wages to reduce your wage bill, and then the other 7,000 would go to your shareholder thing. Another way is if you've got a payroll system, you would normally the wages will often be sent to a code on the balance sheet, like an 800 code, 815 I think it is in Xero. You can code it to there. And anybody who's got like an MYB or a more advanced software system than Xero will probably need to have a tailored situation where you're trying to keep track of what's going on with your payments. But hey, look, I've actually spoken to one of the guys in our team, Josh, today to work out and do a little video on how to code it. So hopefully we get that up onto the interweb maybe next week or something. That will give everybody a little bit of guidance as to what to do. But in the meantime, if you've got any questions, just leave it uncoded, send us an email, and we will be able to basically give you a bit of a hand. All right, so a couple more that have come through the chat. What do you do if your employee works less than the 20 hours? The subsidy is $350, and so for them, say if they only work 10 hours, then I guess you give them the whole subsidy, because the subsidy is there to subsidise their wages. Yeah, so I mean, I guess you probably want as many employees doing 21 hours and not many doing 19, because that would be the most economically efficient and mathematically efficient situation. But yeah, basically, as I said, you can't give the money back, and it's based on hours and employees. So just use the full subsidy to subsidise 100% of their wages in the scenario where they're actually earning less than the subsidy is allowed. You, as a self-employed person, Greg, you can't claim twice. Just like I, as a professional trustee on about 15 trusts, I can't claim 15 times, unfortunately, for me. The application for self-employed subsidy claim requests a company number. The sole trader does not have a company. I've tried putting in his ID number, not won't allow me. Still request a company number. I have a feeling you might be on the wrong web page if it's asking for a company number. I could be wrong. I'd have to have a look into that. But you can send me an email. I'll do you a quick Jono at boostnest.kiwi. Send me an email and I will see if I can resolve that for you. But I'm pretty sure the self-employed actually asks for the individual one, but I haven't been into the self-employed form lately. I've only been into the employer one. Another good question, another really good question. To top up an employee's wages to 80% would mean that my business bank account would go into overdraft. Would that justify not going to 80%, not paying them the full 80%? I would say the answer is I would say yes. If it was me, I would not pay them the 80%, because all you're really doing is shifting debt from the employee to you by doing that. So I wouldn't, but don't know if it's right or not. If Tim earns normally $600 per week, do I pay him $480 or the $585, and can I use the balance to top up someone who earns $1,200 per week? Like I said, it's $585 per employee. There's no commentary on what to do with the surplus. So yeah, I would probably, if it was me, I would simply just reallocate it amongst the team. But likewise, the key thing is that it's being used to subsidise wages and keep people employed. So as long as you continue on with that, that would definitely, I think, be the safest plan. Yes, the self-employed form asks you for the business ID number. So if you're self-employed, you just put the ID number and you don't need to put the company number in. So if you're self-employed, it would just probably be yours, or if you're self-employed through a company, you would put the company's ID number and then put your personal ID number down for the personal employment thing. But I think probably the key thing is maybe, look, we haven't got an answer to a whole bunch of these sorts of things. We don't know. If you want to ask me the question again in 3 months' time, I'll have the answer for you, but it's not much help today. So another one, my wife has been helping since the lockdown. Can I claim a wage subsidy for her? That's if I've already applied and received the subsidy. Well, I guess she's a new employee. New employees qualify for the subsidy. So what you would need to do is put her on the payroll, process it as if she was an employee and not your wife, which could be a little bit difficult, especially if you're working at home. How I would approach it is, if she's only been helping out, she's probably less than 20 hours a week. It's my guess. So therefore, I would put her on an employment contract, put her through the payroll, pay her on an hourly basis, maybe a casual side of things, and then use the wage subsidy to support the payment of those wages. So it kind of seems a little bit dodgy, but according to what we know and the constraints, which there aren't many, that would be okay. If not, please don't sue me. Hi, Simon. I'm assuming that there's supposed to be a question coming. I often get derailed by the hitting of the enter and it just posting the comment in Teams. It's something that I've been getting used to. Yeah, so does anybody have any further questions? Anything else? Look, I hope this has been useful. Yeah, there was a bit of preparation coming into this, and I guess clarification. Look, we had a couple of really odd scenarios over the last couple of days. One of them was we've got somebody on not matrimonial, I've said that about 4 times, on maternity leave. Very different from matrimonial leave. somebody's been on, I just said it. Oh, I'm losing my mind. Maternity leave, that's the one. Somebody's on maternity leave, can I claim for them? Well, what actually ended up happening was the application went in with the person on maternity leave. MSD didn't make the payment for it. And there was a question by the person that was on maternity leave as to, if you pay me, how's that likely to influence my maternity leave payments from the government? So, yep. Right, finally got the question from Simon. What if I'm billing my company from another entity, company for tax purposes? What company do I apply the subsidy from? The subsidy will apply from the company that you are being paid a wage from. So that could be a shareholder's salary or a PAYE, but it has to be from the company that you are being remunerated from. So I hope that answers that one. Awesome. Oh, thanks, Heath. Yeah, love you too, mate. Well done. Very informative and great camera presence. Well, it's pretty hard to stay animated on tax topics for an hour and 15 minutes. So, look, I mean, look, we're thinking about making this maybe a weekly thing because the times are changing. And the developments across what to do, how to do it, are changing really quickly. I mean, look, I've learned more about probably leases in the last week than I had done in the previous year. So it is an ever developing situation. Everybody's unique. The only thing is that we're all in this situation together where we've all got a challenge. I think maybe only couriers possibly are the only ones that are pretty much almost business as usual. Maybe the guys that are driving for Lynn Fox, maybe they're pretty much the same. But hey, look, those guys out on the road, you've got to feel for them as well, because they can't just whip into, BP Express or Wellbeing Cafe, which are probably the same things. They can't get a coffee out on the road now, guys. So, I mean, look, everybody's feeling it. So yeah. One last, if you have a casual worker, would they be considered as an employee, and are they calculated if they do full-time or part-time hours? It doesn't matter whether they're casual, part-time, full-time. Are they an employee? Yes. Do you know their ID number? Well, you should. Do you have their birth date? Maybe, maybe not. Do they do 20 hours more or less? So depending on the answers to those questions, you'll get a subsidy for a casual worker. If one of my staff was overseas and came back early, she was going to start again in May, but can I include her and start paying her now? How I would play this one, unless you need her to start work now, I would probably wait till May. The subsidy will be available until the end of June, I believe, is the cut-off date. It could change. Government could run out of money. Who knows? But at this stage, the availability of the subsidy will be through till June. So I would probably delay her employment until then, and then you could put a subsidy application in there. It might mean that you get a reduced amount of the subsidy because it is supposed to be a 12-week period. And but yeah, still trying to work out whether that 12-week period rolls over past June or not. So that's probably a key consideration. Look, if they were going to start in May, you're at least going to get 8-9 weeks of it anyway. So I'd probably defer it till then. What else have we got? Awesome. Hey guys, look, that's probably about it. Everybody's pretty sick of me. Probably pretty sick of me by now, and everybody wondering where I am. Well, I'm actually in my kitchen, and I live in a log house. As you can see, these are big logs. So look, we're thinking about maybe doing this. I think I started before we got a few more questions in, but we are thinking about trying to do this maybe every week on a Friday. I just picked a time, so and the good news is this should be available for download for all attendees once we have done and ended it up. So look, we'll try and chuck it on Facebook, maybe even YouTube as well, for those that have attended and for whatever reason can't access the link. But yeah, please let us know if you think doing it next week would be good. If not, what we'll do is we maybe do a slightly condensed one with just a few other little changes, and leave this as kind of like the cornerstone. Start here and then progress through the update. So look, it's been a pleasure. I love the fact that we've got one here. Don't stand up, Jono. Not keen to find out what your no pants policy is. Well, you're quite right. I'm not wearing pants. I'm wearing shorts. But I did thought I would snazzy it up for the team today and wear a collared shirt. But I do. It is business up top and party down below. So, but please stay tuned. If you please let us know if you felt this was good. I think most people have kind of said they have got something out of it. We'll look at trying to do this whenever possible in the future. So thanks for tuning out. Really appreciate it. You guys make my business, so it's good that you guys have put some time aside to I guess kind of support us, but also grab some knowledge today. So take care and everybody stay safe. And and quick tip is make sure you check your local supermarket's hours, because the likelihood is that they have changed. Found that out. New World Whitby, which I generally hate going to anyway, they don't open till 9 now. And Pack and Save Porua, they're not open till 9. They close at 7:30 every night. So just make sure, stay safe. And if you really need some booze, apparently Glengarry, the wholesale liquor distributor, has been approved as an essential service, and they can deliver. All right, take it easy, guys. Take care, and look forward to talking to you soon.